Hello, I'm Chris Brett from Eurogamer, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce this final session in today's Developer Sessions. Creative Assembly are here to talk about the future of the Total War Warhammer franchise. Who knows what that could mean? It could be anything. I won't lie, I interviewed them yesterday, I know what it is, and I think you're going to be very happy that you attended this particular session. So, with that out of the way, please join me in giving a big warm welcome to Creative Assembly's Al Bickham.
Thank you all. Cheers. Hi. Afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so very much for joining us. We are indeed today going to be revealing what's next in our big fantasy strategy series. But before we do, I just want to take a quick look back at how much Total War Warhammer has evolved since launch, and really how that's sort of defined the way we're going about the next two installments in the game. Can we roll VT, please? Thank you. So thinking back to 2012 and our sort of pre-production phase, I'd like you to imagine a huddle of Total War developers staring down the barrel of 16 army books from Warhammer 8th edition, figuring out how the hell we were going to sort of build all this into a game. So the challenge of bringing it to life as a game suddenly became very real, and it quickly dawned on us that to do all these races justice and to treat the Warhammer world in that kind of all-embracing, super detailed way that really crucially no one has ever sort of attempted before, we were going to have to take our time doing it. Now, one of our first principles was that every race had to play really, really differently, both in campaign and battle, as otherwise, where's the character, where's the flavor, where's that Warhammer flavor? And Warhammer, as a tabletop game in its own right, is amazing specifically because of its great diversity of characters and content. So we launched with just 4 races, which is a fairly slim roster in usual Total War terms. And in all honesty, that was a bit nerve-wracking for us at the studio, given that our historical titles normally ship with, with 7 or 8 different playable factions, sometimes even more. But, the crucial thing is we were going for breadth and depth in these new factions with loads of different features between them. And as it turned out, that went down really well. Players really embraced that, so we felt good that we made that decision. Since then, we've packed the old world with new legendary characters, 3 new races, elite regiments of renown, and a couple of bite-sized mini-campaigns as well, plus a whole slew of free downloadable content. And even if you don't buy any of the actual DLC, it all appears in the game anyway, under AI control, making your campaigns richer, and really changing the feel of the world as new legendary lords and the sort of sub-factions they control tear about the landscape, causing havoc. So with a close eye on player feedback with all this sort of content release, we've learned a lot about what works and what people really enjoy playing. So if you were to pick up the base game now, even without any of the DLC content, we've also released a whole host of free playable content you can download on Steam. And if we can roll the next video now, we're just going to highlight what that free content is. Adding tons of new content to an existing, fairly balanced system already presents a couple of risks, namely power creep and subsequently a sort of threat to balance across a campaign. So if you take Grombrindle here, for example, the White Dwarf himself, now we released him free as part of a promotion alongside White Dwarf magazine itself. And as Legendary Lords go, he's undeniably powerful. He has 4 quest chains, resulting in legendary items that sort of power him up over time, whereas most Legendary Lords just get between 1 or 3 quest chains and items. He has some really powerful passive traits, and every few turns, he can adopt the aspect of one of his ancestors, giving him a further series of big campaign and battle buffs. So does that make him OP compared to other vanilla Legendary Lords? The answer kind of is yes, it really does. But the important thing is he offers a totally unique and totally flavorful gameplay experience. The point is we've designed his personal mechanics, his stats and bonuses, his very look and feel around the lore, around the Warhammer lore, and that is massively important from the perspective of immersion. So over time, we've learned that actually we're okay with some power creep, provided it's for all the right reasons, and it doesn't upset the game, which of course brings us on to the question of balance. So we put more time aside than ever before for balance testing with Warhammer, because more than ever before, we are dealing with enormously asymmetrical forces. In our historical games, we've always maintained a level of variety between factions, necessarily so. So nomadic tribesmen, say, in Rome 2, have much, much better cavalry than the Romans, who in turn have better drilled infantry. But, these are essentially variations on a period theme. These are still men versus men of varying quality, with a real mix of equipment and swords. You add Warhammer to the mix, and asymmetry kind of flies off the chart, making apples for apples comparisons between units and armies quite hard to make from the outside. On the one side, you might have an undead army with hordes of zombies and flying creatures, and on the other side, you might have, a dwarf and really shooty gun line, and that literally is no guns versus all of the guns. Now, if you add in monsters and characters with more hit points than a whole unit, you add in flying units and magic, and then suddenly you're dealing with real extremes. So asymmetry, for us, actually becomes the chief defining factor in army design. But the beauty of all these extremes and variables is that they also give us loads of different levers to pull to achieve balance in the game. So if a monster's underperforming, for example, sure, we could nerf his cost, but that's kind of a cheap get out, so why don't we throw tons more hit points at him, or make his attacks much faster? Or better still, why not give him some kind of unique special attack or ability that's inspired by the tabletop game? And that's it, really. With the spirit of the tabletop game as a guide, and with all these levers to pull, we have a lot of tools available to actually help us achieve balance whilst keeping things zesty. So when we introduce a character like Grombrindle to the game, we have ways of making sure he doesn't upset the overall campaign balance. So once again, we come to the same conclusion. Asymmetry is fun. Different races are fun to play precisely because they're so different. And through extensive testing and loads of feedback from players, we've learned how to achieve balance in that across the campaign. And then there's mods. So shortly after launch, we released the assembly kit, which is our suite of mod tools, so people can make their own mods and upload them to the Steam Workshop. We've updated that over time, adding a map editor and improving usability over previous versions that we've released. And players have really embraced it. I looked at the Steam Workshop last week, and there were nearly 3,500 mods up there, stretching from tiny little character variants to big systemic sort of gameplay overhauls. And some of the most popular mods are obviously map packs. There's a good reason for that, as they add tons of new battle maps to the campaign game and multiplayer. If you don't like AI heroes performing aggressive actions on the campaign map, there's a mod for that. And someone's even done a mod to reattach Vlad von Carstein's nose to his face, so you can kind of sex him up and make him look a bit like he doesn't have a nose anymore, people are really going for it. People are sort of doing all sorts of visual tweaks and much bigger stuff as well. And all of that keeps the game feeling fresh, and it lets people play the game, but tweak the game's feature set to their own desires. In aggregate, all of this has helped the game become a real success over the last year. The player base has helped us figure out how we should be improving what we're doing with every new piece of content that we've released, and that vital feedback loop, with both positive and critical comments, with opinion, and even through the mods that people are creating. It's all helped us get to a point where we're now more confident and more ambitious about what we're going to do with the next 2 installments in this massive trilogy we're making. So on that note, we get to the meat of the matter. So I'm going to hand you over to Total War Warhammer's game director, Ian Roxburgh, who's going to tell you exactly what we're working on right now. So please give him a warm welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for the very warm welcome. Before I start harping on, here's a little insight into what we're working on next.
Peggy 16.
So this is Total War Warhammer 2. It's a whole new part of the Warhammer world. 4 new playable races and the richest narrative campaign we've ever made. At the heart of Warhammer 2 is the Great Vortex that you saw there in the trailer. It feeds the narrative individually of each of the races and provides a challenging and climactic endgame, as each of the races strives to be the first to either maintain or destabilize the integrity of the vortex. This is a world where the insular high elves, guardians of the Great Vortex, spread their tendrils far across the globe with their elaborate spy networks and their unmatched seafaring prowess, while their dangerous dragons and phoenixes swoop lethal patterns above highly drilled legions. This is a world where the lizard men, the most ancient and learned of all the races, gather knowledge from ancient plaques left behind by their long-lost gods and harness the power of the land to piece together a vast geomantic web in their quest to fulfill their destiny. It's a world where the sadistic Dark Elves swarm out to raid and pillage from the bitter wastes of Nagaroth, their eyes fixed on the Great Vortex. And it's also a world where other unholy powers lurk deep beneath the surface, waiting for their time to strike. We've learned a lot from Warhammer 1. We've analysed the feedback we've got from our fans and from the reviews, both the good and the bad, and we're now striving to evolve and innovate to make Warhammer 2 even better. Already through our DLC releases, the game world has got ever more rich and diverse, even for players who've never purchased any DLC. We've expanded on the features that our fans have liked and continually strive to create fresh, interesting, and challenging new gameplay. In Warhammer 2, we're taking this principle to a whole new level. We're continuing to evolve on the solid base of Warhammer 1, but adding scores of fresh new ideas. We'll be making the characters, the races, and the features even more unique. We want each of the races in Warhammer 2 to be so diverse that you won't so much be choosing which race you want to play as you'll be choosing which style of Total War game you want to play. Warhammer 2 will also have bigger army rosters, universal territory capture, countless UI improvements, greater accessibility features, and much, much more. When we first started creating the vision for how we'd go about weaving the essence of Total War into this incredible Warhammer fantasy universe, it quickly became apparent that we couldn't do this world or a Total War game justice in just one single game. And yet, at the same time, we desperately wanted to cover each of the 16 or so archetypal Warhammer races in as much detail as they deserved and that Total War gameplay demands. And so very early on, we made this decision to build this vast amount of content across 3 main games and do a trilogy. At the same time, we desperately also wanted each of these races to eventually be playable within one huge, seamless world. And so today, it also gives me great pleasure to announce that the Total War Warhammer team is also currently working hard on creating a separate mega campaign map that combines all the content from Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 and all the DLC in between to create the biggest and most rich and diverse campaign the Total War team has ever made. This combined campaign will be available for free to fans who have purchased Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2 shortly after the release of Warhammer 2. Creative Assembly have never been a company to rest on our laurels. I've always said that if you reach for the stars, you may never get there, but you'll certainly get a damn sight closer than if you'd never tried at all. Our most fundamental company value is quality, and that permeates in everything we endeavor to do. But quality involves much more than bringing innovative and exciting new ideas and doing good work. It is also the fervent desire to continue to release solid and highly polished games on the day of the release. This is a philosophy that will be pursued throughout the entire trilogy. So I'm going to leave you now with a little movie the team has put together, giving a bit more insight into the kind of things you can expect in Warhammer 2. Thank you very much. We'll see you at E3. Total War Warhammer 2 is the second game in the trilogy, and it's building off the successes of Total War Warhammer 1. We look at the whole new area of landmass to the west, and we explore the races therein, so High Elves, Lizard Men, and Dark Elves. We got some very, very positive feedback from our decision to sort of really try and make the races play differently. So we've embraced that throughout the DLC for Warhammer 1, and we're doing even more for Warhammer 2.
So the typical process of getting a character to animation actually is quite long. So we start with a concept art of what the character will look like. That then gets modelled with all the polygons. And then my job is putting the movement and personality into that character. The elves have been an interesting challenge in itself because they are all humanoid units. So we have this extra challenge of how do we make them each feel and look different. Lizardmen has been a completely different experience than any other race so far. We tried doing mocap for them, and we found that they were pushing too far into the human side, so we went much more animalistic.
The lizard men have these incredible glittering scaled armies of reptiles which start right down with your basic unit, which is the skink. And then you have the saurus, who are much more powerful, sort of 8 feet of hulking reptilian muscle. And then you have more specialised units. So you have things like the pterodons, which are sort of flying units. You have carnosaurs, which are essentially T-Rexes that are occasionally tamed by the lizard men for battle, and stegodons, which act as mounts, and bastillodons as well, which are often outfitted with an array of sort of magical artillery. So on the battle side, we're looking to introduce more variety in Total War Warhammer 2, and one of the ways we're doing this is by examining sort of different and sometimes wilder new terrain types.
We've got very lush jungle, very beautiful but also very dangerous. Deserts with all the hazards that entails, and all kinds of other environments. So it's really looking to get the flavour the Games Workshop have created in their fantasy setting into our game. So the key locations are Ulthuan, the home of the High Elves, Naggaroth, the home of the Dark Elves, Lustra, a jungle region, and the Southlands, which is a mixture of desert, jungle and other environments.
Bringing a fantasy location to life is pretty challenging. There's not much concept out for the landscapes, so we have to read through all the lore books and decipher all the text and make something awesomely crazy with it afterwards. To the lizard men, we have these big, heavy stone structures, but parts of them are floating by magic. For the Dark Elves, one of the key elements are the Black Spine Mountains, and they're surrounded by a large expanse of hardened lava, probably the most diverse area of the map that we've ever had.
So the Great Vortex, which hovers above Ulthuan, is absolutely integral to the storyline of Warhammer 2. Now, the Vortex was forged in millennia past. There was a great chaos invasion called the Great Cataclysm. The Lizardmen, as the first and most ancient race, were the first to fight chaos. And they only just held on, but it was actually the High Elves who forged the Great Vortex and managed to sort of preserve the equilibrium of the world.
You can ignore the storyline, the narrative. You don't have to fight for the Vortex if you don't want. Sandbox gameplay is sacrosanct to Total War.
The player can go in any direction they want, and that's going to be enhanced this time because players can now conquer any territory they want.
We have 2 legendary lords per race, each with their own start position. You can play co-op multiplayer with the same race, and that creates all sorts of possibilities, and it's something the fans have been asking for. What we want people to feel at the end of Warhammer 2 is that I want them to feel they've had an incredible gameplay experience, which is fundamentally Total War and fundamentally Warhammer, but at the same time interesting, new, different and exciting right to the end.
Finished. Where's Chris? We're finished.
Yeah, that was absolutely my fault. Sorry about that. Thank you so much to both Al and Ian for their time and showing off the new trailer. Really subtle tease at the end there to the 4th race. We'll have to wait and see who that is, I guess. I should point out to those in the room, there are some T-shirts that are going to be given away, exclusive Warhammer 2 designs, and I think you'll get them on the way out. And yeah, if you're around tomorrow, Dean Hall is going to be talking about his new game at 12 p.m. Same for those watching on Twitch. And one more big round of applause to Creative Assembly, if you don't mind. Thanks very much.